It started as a minor annoyance. Ethan had always trusted his dog, Max, to be a good judge of character. But lately, Max had developed a strange habit, barking endlessly at the empty guest room at the end of the hallway. No matter what time of day or night, the moment the door was left open, Max would plant himself in front of it, his ears rigid, his deep growl resonating through the house. Ethan chalked it up to an overactive canine imagination. Maybe Max had seen a shadow or caught a scent from outside. But when it kept happening night after night, he decided to investigate. The guest room had been vacant ever since Ethan moved into the house 6 months ago. It was sparsely furnished, a bed, a nightstand, a wooden chair near the window. Nothing out of the ordinary. No drafts, no flickering lights. But Max's behavior wouldn't change. In fact, it got worse. Now, he wasn't just barking. He was whimpering, backing away as if something unseen stood just beyond the doorway. It sent a chill through Ethan. Then, one night, everything changed. At exactly 2:47 a.m., Max let out a howl that sent Ethan bolting upright. The sound was raw, terrified. He rushed downstairs to find Max cowering near the bottom of the stairs, his eyes locked on the darkened guest room. Ethan flipped on the lights. The room was empty. Just as he was about to scold Max for waking him, something made him freeze. The chair by the window had moved. Only slightly, just enough to be noticeable. He was sure it had been tucked neatly under the desk the night before. Now it was angled ever so slightly toward the bed. His skin prickled. Maybe he had knocked it earlier and just hadn't noticed. Trying to shake off his unease, he pushed the chair back and went to bed. But sleep never came. The next morning, he made a decision. He would set up a camera in the guest room, just to put his mind at ease. That night, with the camera rolling, Ethan forced himself to ignore Max's growling and go to bed. Hours later, at exactly 3:14 a.m., his phone buzzed with a motion alert. His heart pounded as he grabbed the phone and opened the app. The screen was dark at first, then flickered to life. The camera had detected movement in the guest room. The footage showed Max pacing outside the doorway, ears pinned back. Then, the chair by the window began to move. Not a little, not slightly. It dragged itself 2 full feet across the floor. Ethan's breath caught in his throat. There was no one in the room. And then he saw it. In the reflection of the window, a shape. A faint, shadowy figure, barely distinguishable in the dim light, standing behind the chair. His blood ran cold. His rational mind screamed that it had to be a trick of the light, but the way Max whimpered in real time, it was as if he saw it too. Ethan felt a sudden, irrational terror claw at his chest. His house was not empty. He sprinted to the guest room, his breath shallow, his fingers trembling as he threw on the light. Nothing. The chair was in its original position. The room was silent, but Max still wouldn't enter. Swallowing his fear, Ethan checked the footage again, this time rewinding it frame by frame. And then, a new detail emerged. As the chair moved, the shape in the window became clearer. It wasn't just a blur. It was a person, a woman, her head slightly tilted, watching. He could see the outline of her hair, the hollow pits where her eyes should be. And then, the most horrifying realization of all. She wasn't standing in the room. She was standing behind him. Ethan's breath hitched as he instinctively turned around, scanning his bedroom. Empty, but he could feel it now. A presence, a weight in the air, thick and suffocating. A soft creak came from the hallway. Max growled, his hackles raised. Ethan's phone buzzed again. Another motion alert. The guest room door was closing, slowly, by itself. As the footage played, Ethan's hands trembled. The grainy black and white feed showed something impossible. His dog, Shadow, stood rigid at the doorway, its fur bristling. But then, something moved. Not in the room, but in the reflection of the mirror inside it. A shape, shifting, watching. Ethan rewound the video. There was nothing in the room, but in the mirror, a silhouette, barely visible, standing right where his dog had been barking. It was as if the mirror had captured something his own eyes couldn't see. His throat went dry. Had it always been there? He paused the video and zoomed in. The shape was humanoid but distorted, its head slightly tilted as if observing. A cold shiver ran down his spine. Was this just a camera glitch? A trick of light? Or something far worse? Determined to find answers, Ethan decided to investigate. He grabbed a flashlight and stepped into the room. Shadow whined, reluctant to follow, but Ethan whispered reassuring words. The moment he crossed the threshold, the air turned dense, heavy, almost suffocating. The room was empty, yet it felt occupied. His eyes landed on the mirror, a simple antique piece with an ornate gold frame. It had come with the house. He had never paid much attention to it, but now, staring at it, he felt an unnatural pull, as if something deep within was calling him. He lifted his phone and snapped a picture. The moment the flash went off, Shadow let out a low growl. Ethan glanced at his screen and nearly dropped the phone. The reflection showed a face, not his, a pale, hollow-eyed figure with sunken cheeks and an expression of recognition, as if it knew him. A sharp knock sounded from somewhere within the walls. Ethan staggered back, heart pounding. His instincts screamed at him to run, but his curiosity held him frozen. Who, or what, was in the house with him? Determined, he dug into the house's history. Old property records revealed that the previous owner had been a reclusive artist, Henry Caldwell, who had disappeared without a trace. His final painting, an eerie self-portrait, his face distorted in the same unnatural way as the figure in Ethan's mirror. Then Ethan found something worse. A newspaper clipping from decades ago. The artist's wife had also vanished, and her last known location was this very house. Was her reflection trapped inside? Was that what Shadow had been sensing all along? Ethan had to find out. With a deep breath, he returned to the room. This time, he stood directly in front of the mirror. The reflection was normal at first, just him, his flashlight beam trembling slightly. Then, slowly, the reflection changed. The background behind him faded into darkness. His own image distorted, stretching and warping. His mouth opened, but it wasn't his voice that came out. It was a whisper, low, pleading. "Let me out." Ethan stumbled backward, but his reflection didn't. It stayed rooted, staring at him with desperate eyes. Then, suddenly, it lunged forward. The mirror shattered. Shadow barked wildly as shards flew through the air. Ethan shielded his face, his heart hammering against his ribs. And then, silence. He looked up. The mirror was gone. Only the empty wall remained. But something was different. The house felt lighter. The suffocating presence had lifted. Shadow, once restless, now wagged his tail. Ethan exhaled, his breath shaky. Whatever had been trapped in that mirror, whether it was Henry Caldwell's lost soul or something else entirely, it was gone. Or so he hoped. Days later, as he scrolled through his camera roll, he found the picture he had taken that night. The face was still there, smiling.